Remember all the breathless news reports after January 6th about how officers were supposedly attacked in the Capitol? There's not going to be any coverage of what happened to this officer. There will be no teary-eyed testimony from this police officer leading MSNBC every night for the next month. Adam Kinzinger isn't going to go on TV and weep over it. There won't be any dragnet, no 10-year prison sentences. They don't care about this cop because he was assaulted by a mob that they support. Of course, precisely no one is surprised by the media's hypocrisy anymore. By this point, we're used to the fact that the left gets a free pass to commit political violence. They injured dozens of Secret Service agents and torched a church right outside the White House when Trump was president. The left's response was to mock Trump for having to take cover in the White House bunker when that was happening. The whole summer of 2020 was like that. Businesses all over the country were raised as Democrats like Kamala cheered on the mobsters. But what happened yesterday marks a major escalation in what Democrats are willing to tolerate in this country. They're willing to tolerate foreign invaders raising a foreign flag in our capital. I mean, that's now beyond dispute. It's on tape. Kamala Harris didn't condemn the mobsters at Union Station yesterday because she knows they're her voters. She doesn't mind it when they deface monuments with terroristic threats. She doesn't mind it when they drag parked police officers on the ground. Now, she did finally put out a brief statement today condemning what happened yesterday. It took her 24 hours, and she was quite tepid about it, but she reluctantly put the statement out because she has no choice. She knows that she has to. It's just not, you cannot get elected yet in this country when you openly support people who burn the American flag and replace it with the foreign flag. But still, even with the tepid statement, Kamala is the exact same woman she was in 2020 when she was bailing out BLM rioters who went on to murder people. Only now, more than ever, it's clear that she doesn't care about the alleged justification for the riots. Whether they're pro-BLM or pro-Hamas doesn't matter. All she cares about is that the rioters are destroying this country in a literal sense. Again, I mean, if these rioters had left tire marks on an LGBT flag painted on the street or put their feet on Nancy Pelosi's desk, there'd be a nationwide manhunt to find out who they are and destroy their lives forever. But because they desecrated America's flag and America's monuments, they're basically untouchable. I can't emphasize enough that dozens of crimes were committed yesterday in broad daylight. And we know the FBI won't do anything about it. Remember that federal law that got attention under the Trump administration, which makes it illegal to deface certain monuments? That's not going to be enforced here. Neither will the laws against trespassing and obstruction that were used to throw January 6th defendants into solitary confinement for months on end. Burning things in the middle of the city is also illegal. There are multiple laws that are supposed to prevent you from burning anything in the middle of a city street, least of all a piece of property that you ripped down. So this is not a free speech, people have the right to burn the flag. This is not their flag. This was government property. And you're burning something in the middle. I mean, if you went down on a street corner and burned a cardboard box, you would at least get a citation. Because open burning is illegal in the city without a permit. There are many laws that could be enforced here. Totally valid laws. But those laws were not enforced because the powers that be endorse this kind of political violence. And the people who committed the vandalism seem to understand that because they made no effort to hide their identities. The FBI could find them in a day if they wanted to. This is what the Christopher Columbus Memorial Fountain and the Freedom Bell looked like yesterday afternoon. Notice how completely unafraid the rioters are. Watch. No one's trying to stop them. No one will ever try to find them and arrest them, even though they're not even covering their faces. There'll be no investigation into how this mob was transported to Washington, D.C., even though we have footage of buses dropping them off to do all of this. Watch. So you see the buses there. It's a pretty obvious question to ask here. Who's paying for those buses? Is it the same billionaires and NGOs who funded those takeovers of college campuses a few weeks ago? The ones where leftists occupied buildings and destroyed property while camping out in matching tents? If so, it wouldn't be difficult to put RICO charges together and dismantle all the funding that allows these acts of domestic terrorism to take place. At the very least, The DOJ could put together 10-year prison sentences for the instigators. If they did it for January 6th, they can do it here. But again, they don't do that because they want it to happen. Go and check the press pages and social media accounts of members of Congress and the White House. If you do that, you won't see condemnations of terrorist flags flying in the Capitol. Instead, you'll find juvenile screeds about Israel's prime minister. For example, this is what Nancy Pelosi, still the de facto leader of the Democrats in the House, decided to tweet out yesterday as America's flag was being torched a few blocks away. Quote, Benjamin Netanyahu's presentation in the House chamber today was by far the worst presentation of any foreign dignitary invited and honored with the privilege of addressing the Congress of the United States. And nothing in her statement about her own voting base, tearing down an American flag, burning it, and hoisting a foreign flag in its place. Contrast that tweet with what Donald Trump was saying via video on January 6th. He repeatedly called for peace. He told his supporters to go home, that violence and destroying government property wasn't the answer. And for that, Biden's DOJ charged Trump with a series of crimes. Twitter kicked him off platforms, and Facebook. Just 3.5 years later, Democrats aren't simply failing to condemn the violence of their foot soldiers, they're encouraging it. Now, to be fair, I did come across one example of a Democrat who, after a few hours, appeared to be mildly concerned about the pro-terrorist demonstration at Union Square, and it was about as comical a response as you'd expect. As the Israeli Prime Minister spoke, Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut wrote on Twitter, quote, the suggestion that any American who objects to the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza is a Hamas sympathizer was way out of bounds. So he's criticizing Netanyahu for daring to suggest that his critics actually sympathize with terrorists. But just a few hours later, as the footage of rioters flying Hamas flags circulated on social media, Murphy tweeted this little update, quote, I've seen some disturbing images coming out of today's protests at the Capitol. I'll always support Americans exercising their First Amendment rights, but pro-Hamas cheers and messages of hate and anti-Semitism have no place in our country, period. Life comes at you fast, as the kids say. Of course, Chris Murphy didn't retract his original post or issue any kind of apology. Not going to engage in any kind of introspection as to why swarms of Hamas sympathizers just vandalized the nation's capital and attacked a police officer or look into who funded them. He also doesn't say anything to actually condemn the anti-American nature of this quote-unquote protest. The best Democrats could do is some half-hearted finger wag at the rioters who went a little bit too far, or made things a little too obvious. Now, to their credit, House Republicans were vocal throughout the day about what was happening, and they made sure that the flags at Union Station were put back up last night. Watch.
Nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Woo! Yeah!
Now, more than any other series of videos you can find, the clips I played today very clearly illustrate the contrast between the two political parties in this country. And it's not that one party is perfect or anything even close to perfect. It's that one party, the other party, openly wants to destroy the country we're living in, and the other party doesn't. Even if they have often proven themselves ineffective at preventing it from being destroyed, there's one party that actively wants to destroy it, and that is the distinction. We're not even arguing about policy at this point. We're talking about supporting the destruction of the country or opposing it. This is the litmus test. When you see images of these scumbags tearing down and burning an American flag, does it fill you with righteous fury or not? Do you oppose them and everything they stand for or not? Do you want to preserve this country or tear it down? You know, I wish that the political lines were more nuanced and less severe than that. I wish there were finer distinctions. I wish we could afford to pick our teams based on questions less fundamental than should America continue to exist? But we can't. And this is where we are right now. One side of the political aisle truly wants to destroy this country. It's what they desire. It's what they're openly working towards. Of course, as always, the corporate press is on the side of the enemies of civilization. Last night, Politico ran this headline, which really belongs in a museum or something. Quote, Republicans pounce after Netanyahu protesters burn U.S. flags and wave Hamas ones instead. The old Republicans pounce routine. In other words, the real problem here is not that left-wing terrorists attack police officers and put up a terrorist flag while burning our own. The real problem and the real story is that Republicans noticed what was happening. Republicans pounced. Now, if Kamala Harris takes control of the White House, we'll be seeing a lot more flag burning to the tune of Allah Akbar. There will be more political violence by thugs who worship foreign flags. And in response at every turn, Republicans will be portrayed as the problem for pouncing. More than ever, it's clear that the Democrat platform is to replace this country's voters and indoctrinate foot soldiers who are willing to use violence to enforce the party's ideology. That's why Union Square looked like Gaza yesterday. That's why a foreign flag flew in the Capitol. And it's what the whole country will look like if the current party in power stays there.